Man, here got a special guest on today, international renowned high performance strength and conditioning coach Carl Jennings. Carl, how you going?
I'm going really good, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for your time and having a chat today. Really appreciate it very much indeed. So, you have had a bit of an astonishing career, the strength and conditioning and high performance and all that stuff. I believe you started off with Leeds United back in '94. So, was that the season they got relegated?
No, they were still in the English Premier League at the time. They
Yeah.
had a pretty gun side. My background was as a track and field athlete, so I was a
Yeah.
British shot put champion in the last century. That's a long time ago, isn't it? So a natural progression for me into coaching was strength training. So
Yeah.
to cut a long story short, I did a bit of a talk down at Leeds United at the time, and I ended up working with them for probably about 18 months, taking the boys in the gym, doing strength training. Back in the day, it was all about the art of strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
And the natural progression for me then was to move into rugby league at the time. So
Yeah.
I actually went to a team called the Bradford Bulls in 1996, end of 1996, and probably pretty proud of the fact we probably took the first true power and strength training into rugby league.
Yeah.
Nutrition, just because of my background and being an international athlete. And the rest is history with that team, really. They went from a mid-table team
Won the
to,
premiership.
to become World Club champions
Yeah.
within 5 years. So because of that, I got headhunted to come over to the NRL,
Yeah.
which has been a bit of a journey for me, really. So I was
Yeah.
5 years at the Canberra Raiders, 5 years at the Penrith Panthers as head of strength and conditioning, obviously, and then I got headhunted to go across to New Zealand rugby with the Crusaders. I was head of strength and conditioning at the Crusaders, which was a really fantastic experience. And then I got pulled back into the NRL as head of athletic development at the Warriors. So that's probably about a 25-year career up to that point.
Yeah.
So I'm a really proud overachiever.
Yeah.
Where I come from, the north of England, limited education, a loving family, but a pretty tough working class background.
Yeah.
Coming from Hull in the north of England, which is a rugby league town.
Yeah.
To becoming an international athlete, again overachieving, and then through my sporting career, sport's been really good for me. I've been very blessed. I've worked with a lot of the best rugby league athletes in the world, and when I was at the Crusaders, apparently some of the best rugby players that ever played the game, people like Richie McCaw and Dan Carter. So very, very blessed to be able to work with a lot of the best players in the world. Yeah.
Same as in soccer. When you were at Leeds, you had Lucas Radibi and all these sorts of guys. They're outstanding guys. Lee Bowyer, was Lee Bowyer there then?
Yeah, he would just come into the system. And Yeboah.
Yeah.
Tony Yeboah.
All
So
of these
my first game when I was with Leeds.
Who was manager? David O'Leary.
No, it was. Oh God, now you put me on the spot. It was
That's
Howard
all right.
Wilkinson.
Oh yeah.
Howard Wilkinson was the gaffer. The first game that I was on the sideline was Leeds versus Liverpool,
Yeah.
and Tony Yeboah got the goal of the season in the first game of the season.
And they
The
won.
old wonder goal, that you can still see that on YouTube. It was an amazing goal. So I enjoyed my time at Leeds. It was all new.
Yeah.
I was only a young coach at the time, at the late 20s. Strength training in teams was all very, very new.
Yeah.
I've had a blessed career, really.
And everything's changed a lot now since because I played soccer for 34 years, been in rugby for about 30 odd. And I remember when I was coming through as a 14, 15-year-old. So only a couple of years before that, it was nothing to just have a coach go, 30 laps, off you go, boys. That was the warm-up, and then flog us for another 2 hours after we did the 30 laps. So it's all changed now.
It's all changed. So obviously I was probably one of the first strength and conditioning coaches at that level to some degree. So it was all about the art of strength and conditioning. So I think the period of time that I've been blessed to be in elite strength and conditioning has been a really pivotal time. Within that industry. So like I say at the start, it was all about the art of strength and conditioning. Then over a period of time it became the science, and we was all obsessed with the science of strength and conditioning. And now we're at a point now in high performance where it's the balance between the art and the science. You can only coach what's in front of you within your group. So obviously retention and recruitment is a really important part in high performance. Having the right people in the room is so important with group dynamics. But ultimately there's specific things that work, which are valid, and there's certain things that are just the art. It's the trait or the personality that you want to put into your training program. So there's lots of facets of physical development, emotional development, mental development. It's a big role, athletic development, whatever you want to call it. So it is a big role, and it's a very rewarding role. And ultimately, what I do now through my business is very, very rewarding. So the reason why I do what I do now is because I had a life-changing experience. Did you know about that?
No, what happened?
So basically, I left the Crusaders to go to the Warriors as head of athletic development. We had, which probably at that point, that was the highest point of my career. So I was in charge of a large group of staff. I could recruit my staff. I was given a massive budget to build a high performance centre. So in my profession, that was it, so I was very well paid. But 2 weeks after arriving in Auckland, and I talk about this with all due respect to mental health, and there's victims involved with this, so I'm not over talking it or anything. So but ultimately 2 weeks after I arrived in Auckland, my next door neighbour, she attempted to take her life, and she did that by filling her house full of gas containers and petrol containers and setting it on fire. So it was a very traumatic experience. There was a massive explosion, and I went outside, and I went into the flames and saved the lady, which was very traumatic at the time. And there's a lot of things that went on at the time, and there's a lot of things that went on after that time. But I went in one person and came out a completely different person. So
as you would.
No, well, yeah, but it was a really strange scenario. So I went into the flames in a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, and it was an intense fire. And luckily got the lady out, who was really badly burnt, and she was a victim in this because, sadly she took her own life 3 months later. So I'm not talking about this lightly. It's a very serious subject. But for that, I received the New Zealand Bravery Medal from the Queen, which is very humbling, and I accept that on behalf of my family. But ultimately, it changed the way that I completely looked at my life. I was in a position that I'd worked towards for 25 years, highly paid, working with the best athletes, and being given the opportunity to do what most strength and conditioning coaches would dream about, which was build a high performance centre, etc. But I was completely and utterly unhappy. It changed the way that I looked at my life completely. I truly believed in my strange old mind that I'd survived for a reason, and it wasn't to work with the best athletes in the world anymore. And I wasn't too sure what it was. So after a period of time being probably not the best at what I was doing anymore, because somehow it just left me, I came back to Penrith, which is my home, and for a while there I was a little bit lost, thinking about why did I survive? What purpose do I have? What was the reason I survived? So I set up Super 6 High Performance, which I believe would be unique because I wanted to set up something which was a high performance environment, physical and emotional development for all young athletes. Not where athletes are selected to go there, but available for everybody. And for about 2 years, I thought it was going to be a little bit bonkers because very few people understood. We had a few young people that came. It was heavily invested in, so I put everything into it. But ultimately, 6 years later, now we're based down at Blacktown International Sports Park. The council have backed me heavily, Blacktown City Council, because of the work that I do in my community. So my program is really special.
Yeah.
Even though I say so myself.
Yeah.
So after 6 years, we've had well over 30,000 visits.
Oh, wow.
We have
massive.
We have kids recovering from cancer. We have kids in emergency care. We have world champions. We have every colour. We have every creed. We have every religion. We have every demographic. We keep the parents aware. The young people can make their own minds up about each other, and it is a really special environment. Every living cell on the planet is affected by its environment, externally or internally. So we create a really strong environment around our 6 values. That's why it's called Super 6, which is behaviour driven. And it's become a really powerful program. And ultimately, the Two Blues juniors in particular, they started working with us just before Christmas, and we're going to continue to work with the juniors and hopefully the seniors moving forward. So I'm pretty excited about that. So, there's a reason why I'm not working in high performance anymore. It's because there was this traumatic event, which was unique. It's a unique story. It's a bit of a strange story. I'm not religious, but I'm pretty spiritual. And there's no way on this planet. Even every day I think about it, and I can't believe that I got out of there alive. Never mind, not even a hair on my body, even though I don't have any hair like you. Even a hair on my body singed. It was the strangest thing because the heat was extreme. So maybe that was the reason I survived, because history of the last 6 years has proved that there's something good going on with these young people, helping them fulfill their potential in sport and life. So I know it's a really powerful program, but I also work in high performance still. So I developed a mental skills and application program where I've worked with elite drivers, racing car drivers, and in recent years with elite NRL players and NRL clubs. That's been really beneficial for them. So that's where I'm at right now. It's a bit of a journey.
So that was one thing I wanted to touch on with you is I noticed you had a change because I looked at your LinkedIn bio and checked out a little bit of your history and gone strength and conditioning and moved up sort of in a path, and you could see where sport had changed from that to high performance and different stuff. And then you took the avenue to focus in mental coaching. I didn't know about any of the incident you told me about, the fire. So
but that's one of the drivers for that. That's one of the drivers for that. So look, ultimately, when I look back, I had time. When you're in high performance, it's a strange old world when you're immersed in it. It's not the real world. It's a bit of a bubble, and a lot of coaches, historically, it shows you that with coaches that have struggled when they've lost their roles. And, some of them do actually struggle really badly, and some take their own lives, which is really sad.
Unfortunately, like Paul Green and stuff.
It's just terrible. It's because it's like it happens in the military as well. You're in this protective bubble, even though it's high performance. So in the military, it can be traumatic, but you've still got your mates around you. You've still got structure to your day. You've still got purpose in your life. When that's taken away from you really quickly, you get really lonely. And I went through that. What it did for me when I was out of that locomotive going at 1,000 miles an hour, year in, year out for like 20 years, when I was out of it, I had time to think about certain things. And one of the things I thought about was what makes Richie McCaw. What makes Petro Civoniceva, what makes Ruben Wiki, and what makes all these amazing athletes that are right at the top of their game, who they are. And I talked to my young athletes about this, and I asked them the question, at the highest, what makes these people who they are? Is it their speed? Well, no, because at the highest level, everybody's quick. Is it their skill? No, because at the highest level, everybody's highly skilled. Is it their strength? No, because at the top level, everybody's strong. Is it their fitness? No, because at the highest level, everybody is fit. So what makes them who they are? And it's their behaviour. So what I did, I broke that down. I thought about, because I'm being blessed, I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of unbelievable human beings. Not only in rugby league and rugby union, but other sports, world champions, world record holders in various different sports. So it's their behaviours. So what I did, I put it in order where they sit. And I came down to 6 behaviours. That's why I called my program Super 6. So I coach behaviour first. I do that with my young athletes, and I do that with my elite athletes now with my mental skills. So the first driver for this was realizing that it was their behaviors, which was humility, number one. Number 2, sacrifice, and what
Yeah.
sacrifice means. Number 3, loyalty.
Yeah.
What loyalty means. Being loyal to themselves, being loyal to their teammates and loyal
Yeah.
to their family, because the best of the best are very loyal people. Resilience or toughness, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
That's the 4th one. Number 4 is resilience and toughness. Number 5 is actually having a dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're in the pit of their stomach when they wake up in the morning. They're trying to aspire to be somebody or to achieve something. You have to have a dream.
Yeah.
And number 6 is hard work.
Yeah.
Hard work only just creeps on the board, because any fool can work hard. I can drag anybody off the street
And make them
and work them hard,
Yeah.
but they might not be a nice pet. They might not be very humble. I might not want to train them anymore.
Yeah.
They might not be willing to make the sacrifices
Yeah.
by coming the next day or doing what they need to do away from my eyes.
Yeah.
They might not be very loyal. They might not be very resilient. They might not have a passion to do anything, and they might not want to work hard. So it's about
Yeah.
it's behaviour driven. So my program revolves around them 6 behaviours,
Yeah.
and that's the power of Super 6, because we coach behaviour first.
Yeah.
Humility number 1. So off the back of that, I thought in greater depth about, and I was asked this question by a lecturer at a university in Melbourne. He rang me up and he said, I'm contacting some coaches, etc., etc. And I want to ask you a question. What made you a successful coach? So I was talking about that for about 5 minutes, and I thought to myself, well, to be honest, what's made me successful is the fact I'm a really good mentor. You know, I still have really strong relationships with all my players, even going back to that are now coaches. They still contact me, and I'm still mentoring them.
Yeah.
You know, so the thing is, actually being a really good mentor is the key.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? Well, mentors about building relationships. It's about building trust, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about building competency, or the perception this guy's competent. I believe in him. So again, this is a mental trait, isn't it? So
Yeah.
I thought more about that, and I studied that, and I took a lot from what I'd learned over the years, and I put together a program which has become really successful.
Yeah.
You know, really pivotal at that high end that changes people really quickly around a process.
Yeah.
So I'm really proud of that, and it's doing very well at the moment.
Yeah.
And I enjoy doing that, because it still allows me to work at that high end,
Yeah.
while I do my important work, I suppose that you'd call it that, with the youth of our community.
Yeah. So what was the thing that you got out of everything that you've done, the level you've been in, and everything like that, coaching the high performance and coaching kids at all sorts of level, cancer survivors and all sorts of things? What really burns your heart? Like, yes, this has made me super proud, because watching people holding NRL trophies and all that for winning comps and Super Rugby, that's one thing. But I haven't done anything near like what you've done. I used to get a lot of excitement now seeing little kids like doing stuff.
No, well, yeah. So you get satisfied in various different ways, don't you?
Yeah.
You feel like, you know, I think if you have a skill of any type, I think it's your responsibility. It should be your responsibility to give back and leave a bit of a legacy in others. You're only really truly somebody. Yeah. And knowledge itself, knowledge is only powerful if you share it, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I'm a very selfless type of person, and that's a strength. Yeah. But like everybody's greatest strength, it's also your greatest weakness. So there's always a balancing act with everything that you do in life. But to answer your question, that I got that many, I'm a bit of a storyteller. I know you should never ask me that first question. So look, ultimately, you know, I've got a lot of stories, and I've part of being a coach is accepting living in that on the epic scale. Yeah. You're going to have great victories, great moments, great fulfilling moments, and really, really traumatic times.
Yeah. Because you're riding it with the people that you.
Well, you are, but that's all part of it. Yeah. So it's hard. It's actually, you're very privileged if you get to be in that position. High performance is no excuse, is no avoidance. So the fact that I chose not to be part of that anymore doesn't mean to say that I can't create my own high performance, which I'm doing, my own environment. Yeah. So I get a lot of satisfaction out of change. So I'm what you'd class a change agent. Yeah. I can change people. A lot of people can bullshit and do all sorts of various different things, but I can actually change people. So that's something I'm really proud about, physically and emotionally. Is that a gift? Is that a trait? Is that a bit mixture of the knowledge of strength and conditioning or physiology or the way the brain works, or is that an emotional thing or a connection? Who knows? But somehow I have the ability to help people change for the better, which is I take a lot of pride out of that. But as a coach, there's a few moments that really stick out to me. One of them was the responsibility on a coach's shoulders. Now, going back to 1997, so at the Bradford Bulls, we had an amazing year in 1997.
Yeah.
It was first past the post back in the day.
Yeah. Who was coaching them? Was that Tony Smith?
No, that was Matt Elliott. So it was it's Matt
Elliott.
Elliott.
Went to Penrith.
So we had an amazing year. So we won the competition. It was first past the post that year. We actually, I think we went 20 games straight without losing. But they also had the old Challenge Cup, which used to be a summer competition, but they'd changed it to the summer. It was like, so there was two competitions running at the same time. So we actually got to the Challenge Cup final. So for me, it was my first year into Elite Rugby League. So my first year, I had an off season, and then they were doing something different to what everybody else was doing. We were getting really strong in the gym, really powerful. Whereas probably back in the day, they were just doing laps and hitting tackle shields. You know, we were a different group of men. You know, they were training, they were doing elite strength and conditioning, elite power training. I know a hell of a lot more now than I used to know then. I was just an international athlete bringing my knowledge in. So, but we were really dominant. So we were winning all our club games. We got through to the Challenge Cup final that year against St Helens, unbeaten. So on paper, we were just it was a stroll in the park. So, and there was a a lot of key people in that team, really tough men in that team, really good, tough men. And one of them was our hooker called Jimmy Lowes, and Jimmy Lowes that year won the Man of Steel. He was perceived as the best player in the game. But Jimmy still is, but at the time a very, very tough individual. Really tough man. So there's a few things about that learning process in that game. So we went to the old Wembley.
Was Paul Sculthorpe in the side then?
No, he would have been St Helens, so he was against us. Scully was against us. I was blessed to coach Paul Sculthorpe in the Great Britain squad for 3 Tri-Nations series. A great player. It's a shame he didn't have the opportunity to come and play over here because he was a truly world-class player. But going back to the story, we walked out at the old Wembley. It was the last Challenge Cup at the old Wembley. There was 92,000 people there. I can remember walking out the tunnel and the wall of noise hitting you on the chest. It was a physical thing. Anyhow, to cut a long story short, we lost that game. Now, up to that point, for me, my first club, everything's going smooth, everything's great, we're winning everything. And boom, we got to the end of that game. Again, we should have won, but credit to St Helens, they found a way to beat the Bulls through that kicking game, whatever. It was fantastic performance for them. But from a personal perspective, at the end of the game, Jimmy Lowes, who was the toughest of the tough, was sat in the middle of the field on the drinks, the esky, on the drinks esky, crying his eyes out. And I walked across and I sat next to him, put my arm around him. We sat there in the middle of the old Wembley Stadium with, directly after the game. And it was that moment that I realised the responsibility on my flipping shoulders as a coach. Because this is how much it actually means to these people.
And you've got to pick him up. It's his
holy hell's bells. Up to that point for me, it was just euphoric. We were winning. It was just great. There seemed to be no pressure. It was just the game was easy. We were connected. We were winning games. All of a sudden, boom. And that's the beauty of sport, isn't it? That's the power of sport, the highs and lows of the game. Jimmy Lowes, in particular. But so I sat next to Jimmy, and it was a massive realisation for me. It's probably the first time I've actually told this story, but I realised at that time the responsibility on my shoulders. And it changed me as a coach. I don't know if it improved me, but it changed me because from that moment on, I realised, this isn't a game. This actually means a hell of a lot to these individuals. This is more than it's
people's livelihood to everything.
Well, it's the great Liverpool saying, isn't it? From the what's his name?
From cradle to the grave. Yeah.
No, when he said it's not life and death, it's way more important than that. Yeah, so it is. Sport, it can get like that.
Yeah.
So that's something that really stood out at the start of my career. So I realised the responsibility on my shoulders to get up and do the best I could do every day, not for me, but for my men, my players. And that's what I've always tried to do.
Yeah. I think it was Bill Shankly that said that.
Yeah, it was Bill Shankly.
Most successful manager of all time for Liverpool.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, for me, it's probably that story that stands out to me. The responsibility on my shoulders, that I had to be at my best. For them. Yeah. Really, they didn't. I don't think they expected that to a certain degree. They probably do as professional athletes. They want a good strength and conditioning coach. But I think really good coaches understand the expectation, the scrutiny, the pressure they're under, and the consequences that they're under every day. Yeah. Well,
could mean termination of contract and all sorts of things.
Yeah, it is, and when you're in that at the level, you talk about that, and that's a realistic thing. But sometimes when you're out of it, you realise maybe you could have worked a little bit harder. Maybe you could have done things slightly different.
Too late after that.
It can be.
Yeah.
I had that conversation with a young player this morning about hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it? So it's about front loading your destiny, making sure that you're really clear on what your goals are, and you don't want to be getting here and using excuses or avoidance the fact that I wish could have done this better. You've got to plan meticulously. You've got to know your strengths, your weaknesses. You need to make sure that your goals are attainable, and you need to put the things into process to hopefully get really close to achieving them all the time through good planning and good detail.
Yeah. So, got 2 more questions to go. And
was that only one question? Holy macaroni, mate! Yeah.
I'll have 15. No. So, just 2 more questions. So, when you think back over your whole career, in your opinion, who would be the best player that you've raised from, let's say, like an amateur level of football, sport, or anything, and taken them to the highs of?
I've got a lot of examples. I got a lot of examples of that. Yeah. I've got a long list. I think that's what I've always been successful at. Yeah. So to be kind to all my young athletes, that have achieved a lot. Yeah. I don't really want to pick anybody out, to be honest, because I've worked with so many, and the reason why they stand out is because I have a real strong thought process, and I always have, is that talent's overrated. Yeah. What is talent at a young age? So, and that's why I really believe in those traits. So when I look back at, let's just pick, so going back to the English game, we had the Bradford Bulls, but we had a small talent pool to pull from. Yeah. It's not like Western Sydney. We had a small talent pool to pull from. There wasn't that many talented young kids playing league. Yeah. So we had to look outside the box a little bit. And at the time, I picked 2 athletes out in particular, where the club did. They recruited 2 athletes in particular, which was Jamie Peacock.
He's a brilliant fullback.
Yeah, no, he was front rower. Yeah. He got the golden boot, and Stuart Fielden, who was a front rower, who got the golden boot. Now they, on paper, had little talent. One was tall and skinny, and one was playing soccer and cricket and getting sent off every weekend for getting into fights, and this, that, and the other. So we pulled them in, and they was called Project X and Project Y. Yeah. And what I did with them for a year or so as young kids was unbelievable. They trained so hard because the only way they were going to maybe get into grade was to be amazing athletes, and the rest is history with them. So they were 2 athletes who were perceived as not necessarily that talented as young people, but became the best in the world in their positions. Yeah. So they stand out, but I have a long list, a long list of young athletes that I've developed into, that they've put the hard work in, they've made the commitment, they've done the things that they need to do to achieve their goals. Yeah.
So the last question I've got for you, this is a good one. So what's the funniest experience you've had in all your time coaching? So is there anyone you want to grass up or anything that's happened that's
Tim Shand,
not illegal?
Tim Shand cutting his arm on the gate. That's quite hilarious. Honestly, I've got a million, but what goes on tour stays on tour. Yeah, it all goes on tour, stays on tour.
Anything you can tell that's legitimate and
No.
going to put anyone in jail or
No,
get
I
anyone
haven't.
divorced.
No, I haven't. No, I haven't, because they're all the best stories. We all know them. Yeah, you should have given me a bit of a heads up on that one, because I've got 1,000 funny stories. Usually they revolve around me, by the way. They're probably, if I was really honest, it would be the funny stories about me, the crazy Englishman. But yeah, so probably bit of a funny story is about me. Oh, I can bag myself, can't I?
Yeah, you can bag
So,
yourself.
as you know, in the UK, it's very tribal. That's why, as somebody understands about football, you know...
Well, I'm a Rangers fan,
Well,
so...
yeah, you understand, yeah. Celtic and Rangers, it's very tribal, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, just the English culture it's quite aggressive. It's quite tribal. So, a natural trait for me at the Bulls, I had this persona... where I was taking my men into battle. And I know it's not battle, it's only rugby league, but I had the music pumping, I used to take him in, and it got to a point where the rugby league actually drew a little square, 1 metre square that I had to stand in, and they used to put an official there because I am proud of it, but I was like, you know, I was all on, swearing and carrying on. But that was just the English way. That was the English way. I was an emotionally driven coach, highly different to what I am now. Believe me.
For the weekend,
Believe me, the hat was that way around, and it was on. I'm telling you, it was on. And I used to have fans, and I only realised this when I left. People used to say, "Messi or Carl, we really miss you." Did you realise we used to be stood behind the dugout? We didn't watch the game; we used to watch you, you know, because it was so funny, you know, because I was, you know, out of control. So, but. What happened was I came to the NRL, and I had my off season with the Canberra Raiders, and the first game it was against the Rabbitohs at Sydney Football Stadium, and I'm just being me. So I got obviously for me it was the first NRL game that I was taking my players into battle. I went down the tunnel and I'm waiting for them like I'd always done. I'm waiting for my players to come out, so they come out and they're walking out. And I'm on. You know, I'm just being me. And, you know, obviously I was using some expletives and I was being pretty aggressive because it's a contact sport, isn't it? It's on, isn't it? So, you know, and the game happened and can't remember the result, but it was, you know, it was an amazing experience for me personally. Monday or Tuesday morning, I get pulled into the office, letter from the NRL, and I've been heavily fined. And it was actually the rabbit, the mascot. It was the mascot that reported me. Had never heard language like it ever. Who is this lunatic? You know, it was disgraceful. The language he was using. There's you know, there's people in there's cheer girls down there. There's young kids that, you know, and then the club got heavily fined. So look, I didn't realise, you know, because obviously culturally it was different for me. You know, so I had to change the way that I behaved. But I don't know if that's a funny story or. I mean,
it is funny.
It's funny because I'm the Pomiana. You know, I'm the Pomiana. You know, at the end of the day, you know, everybody was taking the mickey out of me, but the club wasn't too happy. But they paid the fine. But and it happened a few other times until I learnt my lesson over the next coming few years, and I got fined quite a lot. But which I'm not proud of. But ultimately, yeah, I don't swear now because I'm working with young people and I'm a bit more mature now. Yeah. So, and I've learned that high performance isn't necessarily emotionally driven, it's process driven, but I used to be a very emotional coach, which worked for me because I'm a good motivator and a good mentor, and my players, I would like to think that they played well under that process. But yeah, so I've got 1,000 stories, but I ain't sharing that with the world, believe me.
Well, all I'll say, I had a coach once upon a time, and he used to get angry all the time and kick bins. So he kicked the metal bin one day and got his leg caught in the bin. They had to get the ambulance to come get his leg out.
Funny
of the
story,
bin,
yeah, funny story. Yeah, I did that with the billboard at Bradford, the big wooden billboards. I kicked it, and my foot went through it, and I couldn't get it out. And you know, I mean, that's. I did this. I've done this. We've all done that. Yeah. Why is that just me and your coach? No. I don't know. So
I've been sent off a few times. I'm not a choir boy all the time. So
yeah. So look, to cap this up, if you want to add this on, is that look, we're here today because, you know, I'm really passionate about helping the youth in Western Sydney and working with some pivotal people in Western Sydney that have the same type of mindset. So I see the opportunity at Two Blues is a fantastic opportunity to work with an amazing demographic. You know, within 10, 15 kilometres of this club is probably the world's best talent. Yeah. Potential gets you fired as a coach, but they're walking the streets right now. They're not in the right environment. They're not getting the right nurturing. They might not feel like there's a pathway into playing for Australia or whatever. You know, so there's a real opportunity for us to actually change that paradigm a bit and really develop the talent in Western Sydney. So I'm really passionate about working with the club that I know that have the same ideas to actually achieve something really special. And I reckon we'll have a really good crack at that. Only time will tell. But I know the right people are in place to maybe achieve that. And I'm really passionate about that, working with some really good people at the club, and hopefully we can achieve something where we can give back to the community, find the diamonds in the rough that walk in the street and changing their lives through sport.
Absolutely.
As sports changed my life.
Cool.
Yeah.
Carl, thanks very much for your time. I appreciate it very much. It was a great honour having a chat to you. And I've got to hear some of your stories when I turn the camera off later. Absolutely. There you go, everyone. Keep on ducking. Going to put this online soon for the Two Blues. I really appreciate having a chat to Carl. So he's a very good coach indeed. Might have played himself down a bit, but the big clubs don't play him down at all. Thanks for that. I'll chat to you soon.